Something just happened that no one was prepared to face. The Shroud of Turin, perhaps the most controversial, studied, and disputed artifact in history, was subjected to a new kind of analysis, not by scientists in laboratories or religious experts, but by artificial intelligence. And what this technology revealed astonished physicists, historians, and even governments. For the first time in 2,000 years, one of humanity's greatest enigmas seems to have found an answer, and that answer challenges everything we believed we knew about faith, science, and history. For centuries, the shroud was described as a simple linen cloth with an almost imperceptible image. A human figure marked by wounds, as if it had been crucified. For some, it was the most concrete proof of the existence of Jesus Christ. For others, nothing more than a cleverly crafted medieval forgery. Carbon-14, microscopes, chemical analyses. No method managed to end the controversy. Now, a technology that didn't exist even in our dreams a few decades ago was placed before this mystery. What it detected is not only impressive, it is disturbing. In the first seconds of this investigation, artificial intelligence found patterns invisible to the human eye. Micro-deformations in the fibers, heat variations, microscopic signs that could not have been manually inserted by any medieval forger. No pigment, no brush trace, no layer of paint. Only an imprint that seemed to have been engraved by something beyond our understanding of energy. What could have left that record in a fraction of a second and still resisted intact for 2 millennia? This is the heart of the mystery. The shroud does not behave like a painting or an aged fabric. It reacts as if it had recorded an extreme physical event, something fast, intense, and impossible to reproduce with known human technology, ancient or modern. When AI interpreted these data, it not only confirmed details already raised by previous studies, but also opened a new dimension in the investigation. To understand the depth of this revelation, we must go back to the beginning. The shroud officially appeared in 14th century France, presented by a knight of little notoriety, without any miracle announcement or historical document legitimizing it. Just a linen piece kept in silence. The story could have ended there, with another religious artifact of dubious origin. But in 1898, a photographer changed everything. When developing the negative of a shroud photo, he noticed that the almost invisible image on the cloth turned into a human face of striking clarity. Suddenly, what seemed like just a burned and worn cloth became an enigma science could not ignore. The most puzzling detail? The image of the shroud behaved like a photographic negative, centuries before photography itself was invented. That defied historical logic. How could someone in the medieval period have reproduced an effect that would only be understood centuries later? In the following decades, the shroud was the subject of countless analyses. Blood patterns confirmed compatibility with human blood of type AB, a relatively rare group. Anatomical studies showed correspondence with wounds described in Roman crucifixions. Pierced wrists, a wound on the side of the chest, thorn crown marks, abrasions on the shoulders as if something heavy had been carried. Even pollen found on the fabric pointed to the region of Palestine in the 1st century. But then, in 1988, came the blow that seemed definitive. Carbon-14 dating, conducted by 3 renowned laboratories, placed the fabric between the years 1260 and 1390 AD. For many, it was over. The shroud was a forgery. However, the controversy only deepened. Experts questioned the sample used, taken from an area repaired after a 16th century fire. Fabrics from different times, mixed, could have distorted the results. And in fact, later research suggested that the 1988 analysis may have tested not the original cloth, but restoration fibers. With that, the mystery not only resurfaced, but gained new layers. It was in this scenario, saturated with contradictions, that artificial intelligence entered the scene. Unlike traditional methods, AI does not seek to confirm a specific hypothesis. It reads patterns, interprets images at scales invisible to the human eye, cross-checks data with forensic models and energy simulations. And before the shroud, the machine not only confirmed old suspicions but brought a result that seemed impossible to ignore. What it discovered, however, was not just a face. It was a narrative engraved in linen fibers, as if the cloth itself had become witness to an event that defied natural laws. And it is precisely here that the story takes a new turn, because AI not only revealed hidden details, it gave them form. It reconstructed a face, a body, an image that for 2,000 years had lain invisible, waiting for the right moment to be decoded. When the first algorithms were applied to the Shroud of Turin, the expectation was limited. Many believed that artificial intelligence would only confirm what was already known: blood marks, anatomical proportions, aged fibers. But that is not what happened. What appeared on the screen was not a simple technical report. It was a face. A figure so raw, so marked by suffering, that it shook even the most skeptical. AI did not invent anything. It did not paint an image. It interpreted the raw data: pixel density, microscopic stain patterns, variations in depth and cloth compression. Every mark, every shadow imprinted on the linen was converted into information. And from this cross-check emerged the reconstruction of a man without ornaments, without idealizations. Sunburned skin, irregular beard, bruises on the face, broken nose, swollen lips. It was a human figure, real, with proportions compatible with the Semitic people of the 1st century. This revelation shocked because it contradicted centuries of artistic representation. Since the Middle Ages, the iconography of Christianity consolidated an idealized image: a European Jesus, symmetrical, gentle, illuminated by a celestial aura. But what AI brought to light was different: an exhausted man, marked by torture, carrying in every feature a portrait of pain and resistance. No divine glow. Only humanity. And this detail, paradoxically, made the image even more powerful. For millions of people who saw the result, it did not look like a devotional icon. It looked like a historical portrait, as if someone had photographed the scene 2,000 years ago. The psychological impact was immediate. Believers were moved. Skeptics were unsettled. Scientists, used to numbers and statistics, admitted there was something visceral in that face. What disturbed the most was not only the result, but the consistency. With every new processing, AI generated similar images, always within the same parameters of proportion and bone structure. It was as if the cloth really contained enough coded information to sustain that man's identity. No matter the algorithm adjustment, the face appeared again. This point sparked one of the greatest controversies. Critics argued that AI could simply be reproducing the bias of its databases, which contain thousands of representations of Christ made throughout history. But this explanation faced an obvious problem. The result did not resemble the European Christ painted by Michelangelo or Da Vinci. It matched anthropological features of 1st century Palestine, confirmed by forensic studies and cranial reconstructions already known, but little disseminated. It was as if AI had crossed two worlds: scientific data and ancient tradition. The face that emerged did not reinforce myths. It humanized the enigma. This opened a new front of debate. After all, what does it mean when a technology without belief, without ideology, manages to reconstitute a figure so close to what history suggests, from a fabric many call a relic? The discussions grew harsher. Some theologians saw in it a confirmation of faith, a bridge between the invisible and the tangible. For them, AI had fulfilled an unexpected role, to reveal what had always been hidden, but inaccessible. Others, however, accused scientists of turning a sacred object into digital spectacle, reducing the experience of faith to a simulation in pixels. Even so, public curiosity only increased. The generated image spread within hours through social networks, reproduced in newspapers, television debates, and documentaries. Many described the experience of seeing that face as disturbing. It did not look like fiction, it looked like memory. A neuroscientist even stated there was something strangely emotional in the portrait, as if the human brain recognized a real pain reflected in the features. And then came the inevitable question: was the Shroud of Turin, after all, a natural negative of an extraordinary event? Was the image imprinted not by human hands, but by some kind of energetic discharge, as previous research had already suggested? This hypothesis returned with even more strength. After all, the very patterns analyzed by AI suggested something far beyond pigments or mechanical pressures. In some simulations, when the data were extrapolated, AI projected the body slightly suspended, as if it had never touched the fabric. The areas of direct contact were minimal, and even so the image was there, printed with microscopic precision. It was as if light, and not matter, had marked the linen. This idea inflamed both defenders and opponents. If true, we would be facing a physical record of a phenomenon still unexplained by science. An ultraviolet radiation burst, capable of emitting billions of watts in billionths of a second, could leave exactly that type of imprint. Only no known technology, ancient or modern, has managed to replicate anything even close. The shroud, therefore, seemed to hold not only the image of a man, but the signature of an impossible event. And now, thanks to artificial intelligence, that signature gained face, expression, emotion. But if the cloth really captured the instant of an occurrence that defies the laws of nature, the next question becomes inevitable. What exactly happened at that moment? As the results of artificial intelligence were released, the discussion ceased to be only scientific. What was at stake was no longer merely the authenticity of an ancient fabric, but the physical record of something that fits no known category of human experience. The Shroud of Turin, after 2,000 years of silence, seemed finally to tell its story, and that story was not easy to accept. The data interpreted by AI pointed to an incredibly specific energy pattern. There was no pigment, there was no paint, there was no material suggesting forgery. The image on the fabric was the result of a process that left no chemical residues typical of paintings or common burns. What was engraved there seemed to have been caused by a radiation emission at very high frequency, released in a fraction of a second. And here arose the most disturbing issue. There is no record of any ancient technology capable of producing such a thing. No furnace, no medieval experiment, no known artistic technique could reproduce a trace so uniform, so detailed, and at the same time so superficial. What we see on the shroud did not penetrate deeply into the fibers. The imprint is restricted to the outermost layer, as if it were a whisper of light burning only the surface, without destroying the cloth. This characteristic made it impossible for scientists to replicate the phenomenon. Even modern experiments with high-power lasers failed to come close to the same result. Any attempt to engrave an image on fabric with light or heat ended up damaging the fibers in depth, something that simply does not happen in the shroud. AI, by cross-checking these data, reinforced the hypothesis that once seemed only speculative, that the image was formed at the very instant the body that was there ceased to be. Not in decomposition, not in deterioration, but in transformation. This point led some researchers to suggest, albeit cautiously, that the image could be the physical vestige of an event ancient texts describe as resurrection, an energy explosion emitted at the moment the body disappeared. There is no way to prove this interpretation, but AI showed something that strengthens the possibility: the total absence of signs of decomposition. The shroud records wounds, blood, torture marks, but there are no body oils, no degradation products, no stains that would indicate the presence of a corpse. It was as if the body had simply ceased to exist in the physical plane, leaving behind only a luminous shadow of itself. This detail led to heated debates at all levels. Theologians saw in the discovery a confirmation of faith. More conservative scientists warned that any interpretation beyond the physical would be speculation. And skeptics maintained that, although the data were intriguing, this did not prove a miracle. For them, the shroud could still be an artifact of unknown origin, but not necessarily supernatural. Even so, there was something undeniable: consistency. With every test, with every simulation, the same elements reappeared. The same superficial depth of the image. The same inexplicable energy. The same human face marked by pain and serenity. For many, that was already enough to acknowledge that the shroud could not simply be reduced to a medieval fraud. As the debate intensified, the image reconstructed by artificial intelligence continued to circulate around the world. Some called it the first historical photograph from 2,000 years ago. Others saw it as a mere statistical coincidence. But in both cases, it provoked the same reaction: discomfort. The figure that appeared before the eyes was not symbolic, not allegorical. It was raw. It was real. And it conveyed something that science has not yet managed to measure: emotion. This may be the most intriguing point of this entire journey. A machine unable to believe, unable to feel, managed to reveal a face that seems to carry pain, surrender, and silence. AI did not produce faith, but generated impact. It did not create miracles, but opened space for questions we cannot answer.